Amanda, would you push that red button?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Deb. Okay, folks, so we'll get started. We have a lot of people out tonight, so there's Sunday I sent out the email to remind folks to get some topics emailed to me, and I received 3 or 4 emails back from people with topics, and then I received quite a few back from people stating they were unable to make it tonight. So for that reason, I tried to keep tonight's schedule fairly light, since there was going to be so few of us, although several turned out that I didn't think were going to turn out. So having said that, I was also advised that the Water Conservation Subcommittee has a presentation that probably with questions will take 40 minutes or so. So we'll take plenty of time to go through that and address any questions anyone has. So with those 2 things in mind, I kept the agenda fairly light tonight. With that being said, the Water Conservation Subcommittee has put together a PowerPoint presentation for us. I printed out their recommendations for council, the 3-page document in front of you. If you don't have one, let me know. I think I got everyone. And it sounds like Trudy has most of that incorporated into the PowerPoint.
I believe so. This might be a little extensive. It might be consolidated up here.
Okay. All right. So with that, we'll go through this, and do you want to do questions at the end, Kevin, or how do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I think it'd be more time effective if we wait to get through this.
Okay.
Well, first I have to acknowledge the other members of the Water Conservation Subcommittee. Patrick can't be here tonight. He had a work commitment. Angie is gone. Thanks also to Kim and Amanda and Trudy for their work. This has truly been a group effort, and I think just having the conversation with the community about the importance of water conservation is more important than anything we're recommending tonight. And these are some things we'd like the committee to consider, and if the committee feels these are worthwhile to forward on to the city council, because we don't know necessarily how to make the donuts, but we know that we need to make the donuts. So when we talk about ordinance revisions or policies, we don't have that all 100% figured out, but these are some things we think that the city needs to move forward on, because we know for purposes of 2018, we really need the citizens of Brandon to kind of pull together, because we've got a limited amount of water resources available to us. We know what's happened in 2017, and we don't want to go through that in 2018. But looking at what our winter usage is, for example, we know we can get there, because we've been doing it for the last 6 months.
And just for everyone's knowledge, will you tell us the winter usage?
Sure.
What's our current usage?
I think it's 667,000 gallons a day. So that compares to a peak day, sometimes reaching or up to about 2 million gallons a day, which, 2.5 to 3 times your winter peak for a summer peaking. That's maybe not outside the realm of what other communities experience, but you also have to have the source, the treatment, the storage, the distribution to meet those peaks. So we know we're not going to be adding infrastructure this summer. So we really need to get through this year with the resources we have, the infrastructure available, and the water conservation practices, beginning with education, that we think the city should move forward with. So I could really summarize this in 3 words. It's education, it's enforcement, and incentives. That first and foremost, we really need the citizens of Brandon to understand why it's important to conserve water. Not just because of what occurred in 2017. That frankly, where we live in this part of the country, water will never be so plentiful that we can waste it. I think water conservation, or speaking for the subcommittee, Water conservation is just an important concept that should be built into our everyday lives, not just literally when the well runs dry. That's not when you should begin water conservation. So, education, reducing Brandon's peak water use for the summer of 2018. Enforcement, providing Brandon City staff with the means to enforce the lawn watering program. We want to educate people. We want people to do this because it's the right thing to do. However, if you don't, here's what happens. So we'll talk a little bit about enforcement. And then finally, the incentives. Assist Brandon residents through community education and rebate program. If we're asking our citizens to conserve water, Trudy, I want you to replace the old sprinkler timer you have on your irrigation system so you can adhere to the odd-even system. Well, my sprinkler timer doesn't work that way. Well, we should incentivize people and allow them to replace those timers so they can be part of the solution. Replacing aging toilets in Brandon will have an effect. Maybe not 10% reduction overnight, but if you remember what Tim Stefanich and Darren Fries talked about, and even look at what the city of Brookings used, there is a decrease over time. And these are things where you don't even have to think about it. Every time you flush the stool, every time you use a water-conserving shower head, you're saving water without thinking about it. So if we can build that into our everyday lives and incentivize that for our citizens in some fashion, I think that helps offset the concept of if you don't adhere to the lawn watering schedule, there will be enforcement actions taken against you. So if we want you to do the right thing, let's put our money where our mouth is. We don't have a dollar amount that we're talking about here, but again, we're not asking for the recipe on how to make the donuts. We just know we need donuts. So we were just talking about this, and this is the last few years of water pumped. So you can see there's been average, or there have been annual increases. I think we've probably seen some of this information before. What we included was the conservation trigger of, and this is in thousands of gallons, so that's actually 1.6 million gallons. And then down the bottom, that lighter colored gray or blue line is the winter average of 667,000 gallons a day. So today, we're probably using about 667, 665. That jumps up to almost 2 million in the summer. That entire gap, or as my engineering friends like to say, that delta, the difference between, that's outdoor water use. That is almost entirely within our control to manage. And we're not saying don't water your lawns. We're saying be wise about how you use water, first and foremost. And interestingly, we had some higher peaks in 2016 than we did in 2017. But the trend is every summer, up and up and up. As Brandon grows without some additional management of our water resources, that's just going to continue to go up and up and up. So if people wonder, why are we talking about water conservation? It's not just to reduce our overall water usage. It is dealing with peak days. And where for the summer of 2018 can we make the greatest gains? It's in irrigation. So one of the things, and I think this is really more of a public education part of it, that piece is, and I think Tim even mentioned it at the last meeting, sort of when you go into a national park and you see fire danger is high or fire danger is low, I don't know what the soil moisture is in Black Hills National Forest, but I know when I see that sign and I'm driving into it, oh, fire danger is high, it's really dry, I need to be cautious. There's probably things you can't do in national parks when the fire danger is very high. No open fires. Okay, that's reasonable. So if Brandon were to look at stage one lawn watering program, stage one is in effect year round. 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. schedule year-round. Make it simple. Have people think about it now, not in July when they're leaving town, or no, I don't know how to set my timer. Think about it now. If you need to make changes, well, if you use an irrigation contractor to come and either blow your system out in the fall or set it up in the spring, talk to them about this. Let's begin with level green. Things are good. Things are green. We can get by without even if we adhere to that lawn watering schedule. Stage 2 would be when we exceed 1.6 million gallons of water per day for 3 consecutive calendar days. This would be the yellow stage. All right, if we're using the concept of let's all, or half of us, only water on any given day, if that's not enough, if we've gone through May, June, and into July, and we're just not quite there yet, and we're getting to that 1.6 million gallon per day limit, we hit yellow. It's time to, put the brakes on, slow down, because the light's about to turn red. You don't speed up through a yellow light. Slow down. So that would go to 1 day a week lawn watering. And again, this is a huge part of the public education program, is to let people know, how are we doing? Are we at green? Are we at yellow? Yellow is based on the 1.6 million gallons. And to not jump ahead, but if there is a different trigger number, Raleigh, if there's something above that or below that, I think this is something we just want the city to be aware of. There needs to be a line at which we go from green to yellow, not just green to red, and red being stage 3, because stage 2 just isn't working. We've tried everything else, and then we look at really limiting outdoor water use, which is not where we necessarily want to be, but every community who has water conservation measures has something maybe not just like this, but in an effort to involve and engage our citizens to be part of the solution, let's give them something like this. Let's have them understand, and maybe we have this on the city website every day, so people look and they see what icon is up in the left-hand corner for lawn watering today, based on the last 3 days of pumpage. Today, it would be a bright green because probably not a lot of watering going on. So, red, yellow, green, green, yellow, red, however you want to look at it. Lawn watering program. So we looked at also a couple of different ways of what happens if we have to go to that 1 day a week lawn watering. How does that shake out? Well, come to find out, we have almost an equal number of odd and even number addresses in Brandon, 1703, 1730. So, from an odd even standpoint, that works pretty well. If you look at it, and this is over a 7-day period, so if follow the math here, if your address ends with a 0, and we have to go to 1 day a week lawn watering, your day is Monday. 1's on Tuesdays, 2's and 3's on Wednesdays, 4's on Thursday, 5's on Friday. Anyway, you kind of space it out. So everybody still has a day. We're not in a total ban. And there's variations on this. And the blue line is the blue bar is residential, the red are commercial, but frankly, commercial properties are not the bulk of our water use outdoors in the summer. It's mainly residential. So the goal here is, all right, if we have to go to 1 day a week, what's my day, and how do we make sure that we don't have a disparate number of people with the last number 5 impacting the system. So this actually works out pretty well. This is as close as I would want to see it if we have to go to that level. I think there's a way to manage it. And 1 day a week, you can still get an inch on. Your lawn won't go entirely dormant, but at that point, I think people need to be paying attention to where the city is at in terms of water usage. If we're in that yellow phase, you darn well better be adhering to these watering, to your day. And I'd like to especially thank Trudy for putting together these indoor and outdoor tips. So these are things, again, we're not looking at this as just being a one-time thing with our residents. We need to begin now and have a constant message from here till, well, whenever, because it's really a journey, not a destination, why water conservation is important, and what can you do about it as a resident. You might think, well, there's only a couple of things I can do, or I don't know how to conserve water. What does that mean? If you read these outdoor tips, and this is going to be most important for 2018, because again, that difference between our winter usage and summer usage, primarily outdoors, primarily lawn watering, what can I do to be part of the solution? There's a lot of tips here. I'm not going to go through every one. I think you've also got them in the handout, but
I don't think so.
what we would like to do, or you'll have copies when this is printed, what we would like to do is work with the chamber, work with the city and with utility billing stuffers, and certainly engage the local media to provide some of this information to our citizens, our residents. We want you to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, because we're going to be much more successful if people understand why it's important, and then they willingly do it. I want to do it because it's the right thing to do. So we've also got So what we would also like the city to consider doing is having plumbing retrofits, to have some sort of budget for replacing aging toilets, replacing your underground sprinkler system timer, to have water sensors for your lawn watering, so you can judge what the moisture content is. And we've got actually that example, that kiosk over there from the city of Sioux Falls, that we'll be able to provide, or we would like to have copies of this around town too. So we don't have a budget established. There's no number we've said to the city council. It should be $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, whatever. I think our recommendation from the Water Conservation Subcommittee is, let's start small. Let's start with something. Let's target what we can in the near term to rebate back 100 toilets a year, or 50 rain sensors, or 75 shower heads, whatever it is. Let's make that effort to show our citizens we're taking this just as seriously as you are, because we're asking people to conserve water. We should educate, tell them why. We need to enforce what we have, and then we also need to incentivize some of the things that we would like them to do. So we've also talked about the code enforcement processes, and I think right now the city ordinance says lawn watering violations is a misdemeanor, which I think that would have to be issued by like a police officer. Other communities make it an administrative citation. So you would have the ability through code enforcement processes to issue $100, $200, $300 citations for citizens who are in non-compliance, which you could also use for things like sidewalk snow removal and nuisance vegetation. Again, we would recommend that the city attorney take a look at that, because going from a misdemeanor to shutting people's water off is probably not reasonable. But we think there definitely has to be an enforcement aspect of water conservation. We want people to do it because it's the right thing, but there need to be consequences for anyone who chooses not to adhere to the lawn watering schedule that we have. So having the courtesy door hangers, we think is a great idea. We can certainly borrow, I think, Trudy, you have one there.
I just have to find it. This one?
Yes, thank you for the drop.
Oh, yeah, too.
And Brian, I know the city of Brandon has done some of this in the past. And really what we're talking about is just a more formalized water conservation program. With, I like these courtesy door hangers because, it's just a gentle reminder to people is, hey, maybe Raleigh forgot today was not his day to water. Somebody saw it, we hang the door hanger, and you get home at night, I'll remember not to do it next time. These are very simple things we can do, but we also think it's important for people to understand that we take this seriously as a city. So some of if there's ordinance modifications involved, Brian, yeah, city attorney needs to take a look at those. City council needs to consider whether they're reasonable or not. But if we're talking about changes, some of these are just a natural progression of growth for a community that we want to incentivize, but we also have to update some of our enforcement practices and procedures so it isn't just Raleigh out there running door to door trying to figure this out. If the city has to hire part-time staff in the summer just to do nothing but put door hangers out, if it comes to that, that's a courtesy. That's something I think we're trying to part of the education program with our public, is we want them to know not just what the rules are, but why this is important. And we don't have to do it with sworn police officers who, for your first violation, you have a misdemeanor. That just seems, I think there's something in between we can look at that's been effective elsewhere, because we don't want people pushing back against this. Because I think most people will want to do it. They'll want to adhere if they know what it's for and they know what they're supposed to do. I have an even numbered address. I will water only on even numbered days. I will not water between 10 and 6. And why? Because that peak, I don't want to get us to 1.8 million gallons per day, because then I only get to water once a week. If we limit that peak day usage, we on the Conservation Committee think we can get through 2018. But it won't be just roll this out in March and April and we'll be done. This is going to be a program we need to have different pieces to. Something in April, something in May, June, July, August, whether it's putting up kiosks like that over there at the grocery stores or places, even in the schools, where people will see it every time they come into an orchestra concert or they go to some other event. Is, oh right, water conservation. I got to remember to do that. And if we can add some dollar amounts behind it, oh, I can get money back. I was going to replace that stool anyway, but if I can get money back from the city, I'm going to do it sooner. All of these things will add up to success. There's no silver bullet. Not one of these things alone is going to be successful. That's why it's a water conservation program. We have a long way to go, but it's March. We're going to get there before peak lawn watering starts. So we will continue as a subcommittee, come back to this full committee and hopefully on to the mayor and city council with some other ideas. But we wanted to give you this update to have you take a look at the recommendations, which are: 1, create a stage lawn watering program; 2, create courtesy notices and administrative citations for lawn watering program enforcement; 3, create an annual conservation budget. Simple, sort of high-level concepts, but all part of education, enforcement, and incentives. So if I've left anything out, Trudy, Amanda, Kim, please jump in. And I'm well below 40 minutes.
I would like to talk just a little bit more about the 5 days a week versus leaving the weekends without
Sure.
watering, just for a second, just to get Raleigh's input?
Sure, this is, and I didn't go over this slide, I skipped over it. This is what 5 days a week would look like. If we go 5 days a week, if we go into advanced, level yellow, and we're not having any watering on the weekend, it's only Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we looked at zeros and one. These are addresses that end in zeros or one. On Mondays, 2s and 3s on Tuesday, 4s and 5s on Wednesday, 6 and 7 on Thursday, 8 and 9 on Friday. It's about the same breakdown as 7 days, but from a water delivery standpoint, does it help? Does it not matter if when we're in 1 day a week lawn watering, whether it's spread out over 7 calendar days or 5 days, Raleigh?
We see most of our usage on the weekends because there's more people that tend to be home. So it's wash the car, wash the camper before we go somewhere or something like that. That's where you're going to see more usage.
My
Yeah.
thought, go ahead.
Were you asking more on the fact of that is that the capacity, the gallons, the 670,000 gallons or whatever a day? What's the number on the left-hand side?
That is the volume, or that's the number of.
That's your volume?
That's
Or is
just
that
the number of
gallons?
users. That's just
Okay,
number
so
of
you don't know how
gallons.
many gallons that is?
No, we didn't
That's just
look
the-
at it in terms
Oh,
of
okay.
gallons per address. This is just.
Oh, I misunderstood
down
too.
by
I thought that was
Okay.
gallons. Okay.
This is
Okay.
number of accounts.
Okay.
And my thought here was that, and might have been only mine, but we did discuss it. If we had the weekends to recharge, would that help the water to recharge?
Filling the
Also,
storage
if
and-
people are gone on the weekends and Sunday just happens to be their day to water, oh shoot, I can't water because I'm going to be gone. And that was the reason we kind of discussed just the weekdays. But would it or would it not help to recharge over the weekend?
If we could have 1 day to recharge, I think we'd be tickled,
Yeah.
if it's in this situation.
Can I ask, does Sioux Falls do this?
They just do odd even, and they have a 7-day-a-week schedule when.
So they do. So they go to the 7. Okay.
And when we're in a little bit better position, maybe with the storage, maybe it won't be as critical. But this last summer, would really be pretty valuable if we can have a day to recover.
Right. For purposes of tonight, again, we're asking the committee, to support the 3 concepts, not necessarily every, every nuance. If there's a different way of doing this for that 1 day a week, great, because you've got to manage the daily supply. Brookings went the other way. I think when they started their conservation program, they were on a days of the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then they let everybody water on Sunday. And you can imagine what that did. It created massive peaks on Sunday. So, however we look at it, just by the breakdown of, and no, we didn't do it by account, by gallons. But if we just assume, because that's kind of where we're at, based on the numbers of addresses, to spread that out. We want everybody to have an opportunity. If we get into 1 day a week lawn watering, everybody gets an opportunity, but if we don't have, we're not creating our own unanticipated peaks, right? That's what we want to avoid. So if we had daily usage by account, I think we could maybe get this much more well-defined, but in absence of that, I think this is still a pretty good method of at least considering it.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of the peaks really just kind of flatten out. There's going to be hills and valleys, but they're not going to be as extreme if we go to something like this.
Right, and this shows that if we just break it down by addresses, there's a way to do it. Yes.
I have 2 questions. So, first of all, businesses are included in this also.
Yes.
So it's just
Yes.
everybody in Brandon, businesses and
Yep.
residential. Okay, and then as far as the educational component, have you thought a lot about that or more of what to
Well-
do? I mean, because there's a challenge, because so many of us work in Sioux Falls. And so getting the information out to people who don't read the paper and don't want to check the website every day, and we need our little Smokey the Bear sign coming into town. The most effective thing I saw last summer was the big sign coming into town that said water restrictions,
Yes.
and I went, oh, okay, I get this. So have you talked about how you're going to reach out with that
You know,
little
initially, there are some traditional methods, the utility billing stuff.
Yeah.
I get it, not everybody reads those,
and it's
but
okay
some people
online.
do. Probably those that are you know, if they're opening their utility bill and reading all that stuff, then they're probably motivated to be part of the group that needs the least amount of education. But personally, I think our opportunities with social media and, you know, electronic means, because we can reach so many people with less investment in terms of city resources. We're not out putting things on people's doors. Everybody doesn't have to get this. People sign up for stuff like that they will respond to it. But I don't think we should limit it to one method or another, Pat.
No, I think you need
We've
multiple to reach everybody.
Yeah, we've talked about how to get to, you know, through the chamber. And Kim's not here, but we talked to her about a chamber newsletter with that information that goes out as well. But I would love to see presentations to service clubs, you know, to whoever, you know, groups around Brandon from.
Look what happened with reduce, reuse, recycle when you hit the fourth graders at water festivals. You know, every kid went home, and whether their parents liked it or not, their kids are recycling. Their kids are turning off the water when they brush their teeth. You know, getting that into schools also is a great.
Yeah, that's something that the subcommittee has talked about, is the public education plan. That it's not just, well, here's the message.
Oh yeah.
It's got to be, how many different ways can we communicate it? Which different groups can learn best from those different methods, and keep the message simple. Keep it simple.
And again and again and again
And again and again and again and again.
redundant communication.
Yes.
So
It's
the
not, you know, oh, I'm sorry, Tim.
go ahead.
Well, it's not going to be just one time. And it shouldn't just be about, well, we don't want to have 2017 happen again. I think that this is really important for our community, just to build into everything we do. Water conservation should just be part of.
This is about
part of
Team
business.
Brandon. You know.
Well, and that was my point too. This has got, it's kind of like the recycle thing. It's a lifestyle change. We're not just talking about a year. We're talking about a lifestyle change that is going to go on and on and on for the next 100 years. We are not just talking about trying to get through 2018, even though we are, but it is a lifestyle change. It is something that we want everybody. It's like dieting. If you want to stick to a diet, you have to make lifestyle changes. If you want to recycle, you have to stick to lifestyle changes of rinsing out the cans and the milk jugs and making sure that they get in the right spot. So I think that's a big component of it too, is focusing on, it's a lifestyle change that we need to incorporate in the town of Brandon.
This is so much easier than dieting, though.
It is.
Well, it always
So much
helps when you
easier.
have the kids guilting the parents. So I mean, I think
Yeah,
the
it's-
approach of the schools is
Yes,
a great
yes,
thing.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
there's tremendous opportunities.
Right. So the one thing I was going to mention is I know that the city has those beautiful banners of the police chief and a few other members of the community. It doesn't cost hardly anything to replace the graphics on those. The main cost of those is typically the device, not the graphics. I've replaced graphics on mine that I have a few times, and it's very cost effective. And that's, I don't know if that's owned by the city or the chamber.
I think those
That's
are
the
chambers.
chambers.
But
She
you know,
mentioned
maybe
maybe
it's
even
something we
doing-
could, you know, work
doing
together
that,
with
yeah.
her and do something there, and you know, or the city invest in those pull-up banners. But you know, every time I went to Ace or the Sunshine or any of the local places, I saw those and it caught my eye. You know, and that was you know, something that was important. And you know, I think the kid involvement is going to be key, and if you could make that somewhat tailored to you know, think of how the grocery store lays out their aisles, right? I mean, they have certain cereals at certain heights, so the kids see those, and that's the ones they want. If you think about that banner, think about the eye level of an adult versus a kid, and if you put stuff at eye level of a kid, that they're going to literally start picking on mom and dad because they're being wasteful. I mean, honestly, that changes my behavior more than anything, is when my kids are saying, hey, Dad, come on. So I think that might be a good opportunity as well, and that whole education communication piece is what I'm very excited to see that starting to roll out, and the sooner the better. I mean, it's, you know, it's spring, and we're going to have a wet spring, and the river's already coming up and flooding over roads in the county, so everyone's thinking, oh, water's plentiful, water's plentiful. Well, we need to start getting ahead of that and say, well, that doesn't mean you can water your lawn every day. Right,
and you know, one of the other things we've talked about a great deal at the subcommittee level is this should be a positive thing for the community. So this is something that I think is really good for us, that we change our habits a little bit, and you know what, maybe people save themselves money on their water bill because they figure out, I don't need to have my sprinkler system going every single day, that 1 inch a week is plenty. Go ahead, Pat.
So this education component, is that going to fall underneath the Water Conservation Subcommittee? Who's going to be responsible for, we're going to do this, 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 and this as a way of recommending that? Because that is something that really needs to start soon.
To the extent we need the assistance or in the leadership of the city staff, the administration, the elected officials, this committee, I guess the way we were kind of thinking is we would bubble things up to the full committee, and if the full committee thinks this is worth pursuing, if it's going to require an investment from the city of Brandon, whether that's paying for getting these door hangers printed or creating a budget for water conservation, I think it will be most effective if we continue to bring things up to the full committee and then on to the mayor and council, especially if there's policy, ordinance, modifications, that definitely has to be brought through the process.
So the one thing I'm nervous with that, I like that idea, but one of the things I'm nervous about is I kind of see the need for the committee, and Don and I talked about this, the need for the entire committee to meet every other week, and realistically the subcommittee is something that's going to probably have to stick to that schedule, where the whole committee might be able to take a more relaxed approach, and I don't want to see delays there on your behalf because of that as a subcommittee. So it'd be interesting to see if anyone had ideas to make sure that waiting for the committee to meet, I don't want that to slow down the progress of the subcommittee, if that makes sense.
Oh, I don't think it will. Again, we're in March, right? So we have time to continue to bring things up through the committee structure with the timing that we have. I think the greater issue is going to be if there's discussion if there's support from the committee, discussion with the city council about ordinance changes, budget impacts. Those probably need to move forward a little more quickly because those changes take longer.
Right.
And I have budget, establishing a budget in my notes here, so we'll get to that before we close this discussion.
But honestly, Tim, the idea of how quickly can we get this going, I just think having these conversations publicly is going to help educate the citizens of what needs to be done. That, yeah, some of it we need to sort out, but fundamentally,
right.
Let's make sure people know, if you adhere to the odd even 10 to 6 watering schedule and you employ some of these practices that Trudy put together, especially that we've presented tonight, or at least had on the screen, that's a really good start. That's a really good start. And some of the things like with tiered water rates that will be coming later, that might take a little bit more discussion.
Yeah, that's probably not this summer, but
it
could be. Yeah.
We know there's immediate needs
right.
and long-term needs, just like there are with water supply issues. So there are too with water conservation, and the two are they're interrelated, they're not mutually exclusive.
And I-
Sorry, Don, I've gone over my.
No, I like I said, I was told we would. So I guess a couple of thoughts I had,
Hold on. I just want, before we get off the subject, I think it's important to keep in mind Brian's comments back about what it takes to change the ordinance for the proposed scheduled fines and that. If we don't move quickly on some of these things, we will bump up against the May 2nd effective date deadline. And that's what we don't want to get into watering season before we can even make these changes. So that's all I want to say.
No, that makes sense.
So educate, enforce, and incentivize. I like that. As far as education goes, you know, we talked about that when we were talking about doing a video. I think I agree. One of the ways to get that information into the homes is through the kids. So I would challenge you guys as a subcommittee to come up with some type of a program, possibly. And if you want this committee involved in that, we can do that too. But like you say, I think we need to do this now, not 4 weeks from now. I think we need to get started on it now. Come up with a program to get into the schools, you know, to get in, especially to the elementary schools. Well, I shouldn't say especially. The elementary schools, middle schools, high school. Get in there and talk about water conservation, even if it's a 20-minute talk or maybe it's an hour talk. Maybe there's something that can be done there to get in front of the kids and get them started thinking on this, so that when they do see your banners in the stores, etc., you know, they put two and two together and it really drives it home. And I would challenge us and your subcommittee as well to, I think we should probably move on that sooner than later, because as you stated, some of the things take a while. This is city government. It's not, you know, a private enterprise. So sometimes things take a little time, and we want to get this, we want to have the balls rolling before summer hits.
So Don, you think doing it in the schools, that's really the main focus, that we need to hit that age group? Or, because I'm just thinking time, I mean, we were talking about this as well, putting something in the chamber newsletter, that would be done fairly quickly if the committee thought that that's something we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking that we need to focus a little bit on the adult side, because they're the ones that are going to be. So whether it's something that goes into the Brandon billing that says, these are the things that we would like to encourage everyone, or however we want to say it positively, and then, you know, something that would say, and these are some things that we are looking at in the future, and bringing the community in, you know, putting something to say, hey, go on the website.
So I've got, I have all that here. The kids, I wouldn't say that was my focus. I've got 5 points I want to hit when it comes to education. One of them being the kids. Second, social media, which we're going to come back to that in a second. And then I've got email and text messages. Brian, what can we do to look at getting on our website, getting it set up? I know we can do email alerts currently. What can we look into a system that does the text messaging?
We've already had contact and demonstration from MyTown Text, and we're getting a demonstration from another provider.
You are. When will we have that?
I would imagine the next week or two.
And will we have costs in that time frame?
MyTown Text is $50 a month and 4 cents per text.
4 cents per text, $50 a month. Okay. All right. So let's come back to that in a second. So I have email alerts, text alerts, and then the signs. I mean, we had talked at one point on council, we had talked about, in fact, when we brought the LED electronic signs out on Rice and entering into town, we had talked about at some point possibly doing a city-owned LED sign, and I know that those are expensive. I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion, maybe a possibility. But as far as I had a question on as far as your yellow and red and green signs. I think that's a great idea. Obviously, we have to educate people so that they understand when they see yellow that they know what that means. But have you guys thought about, or do you have any recommendations as far as where to put those signs and how to structure that? I think that's a great idea too. Along with, you know, like what you were talking about, I think these types of things that, you know, like Tim brought up, I think these types of things, the tall standing signs and that the chamber put out, I think those are phenomenal. Which is why I want to get to talking about a budget here in a minute, so that we can maybe start moving forward on that. But as far as the green, yellow, and red signs, any ideas? Or
I don't know that we had any specific.
I think we talked, well, this is what I brought up was, you know, the stickers have a green, a yellow, a red sticker on the outside envelope of the billing. If that would draw attention now. Not everyone's going to look at their bill maybe,
Okay.
but that might be, but that's just once a month.
Or maybe the envelope itself?
On the envelope,
Right, on
yeah,
the
that's what I
envelope.
meant, on the envelope, not inside it, but on it.
No, I'm saying instead of a sticker, maybe the envelope itself be
Oh,
red.
there you go, yeah.
Right? I'm
If
just
they're-
throwing
Mhm.
suggestions, sure. The reason I'm bringing this up is I would like to get moving on some of this, and maybe get, you know, this next week or two, maybe we could start working on cost estimates for some of this stuff, just so we know where we stand. And obviously, we can't do everything, but we can certainly.
And that's somewhat connected to any ordinance changes regarding the lawn watering schedule. So if the city were to draft an ordinance or resolution saying, okay, these are going to be the schedules based on these triggers, I think that public education piece follows it, but I don't want to get the cart before the horse either, because some of this, as Trudy pointed out, we've got some deadlines for city staff to consider if the committee moves forward with a recommendation to the council that, yes, we think the green, yellow, red method of lawn watering, for as far as the schedule goes, is a good idea. It's going to require some ordinance changes. Yes, as part of it, we would want some definite, a lot of public education, but I want to make sure, you know, for purposes of our elected officials, they've had an opportunity to talk about this first. And is
Yep.
that something you could bring
That's,
up?
yeah, that's something I haven't, again, I have that written in my notes. In addition to that, I had a question for Brian. So if we go to more of a city citation than, like you say, a misdemeanor, let's say, because we had talked about this before, hiring a summer intern and utilizing that person to drive around and help enforce. Obviously, anybody can hang a door hanger on a door, but as far as issuing a citation, like you brought up, it was a great point. As a misdemeanor, that's probably got to be done by law enforcement. If it's a city citation, can that be done by yourself or Raleigh or a summer intern? Is there, how does that work?
As far as a municipal infraction, we'll need to take a look at how, number one, what happens if it doesn't get paid? How do you collect them? Do you shut their water off after a week? Do you issue them a misdemeanor? If you go out and issue $100 fines on a municipal infraction, we've got to know how that's going to be enforced. How are you going to collect those?
Yeah, we
We
can't
just have
start,
somebody just flip us the finger and say,
Right.
I'm not paying your $100.
Right, sure.
but
Right.
we can't
So we gotta
educate
figure
the
that
public
out.
to that and then expect them to, you know, if we tell them this is what's going to happen, we have to follow through with it.
Right.
Or it's like not doing anything.
Right.
And I think the city of Sioux Falls said they had some rules on who could issue those citations, if I remember right. It wasn't just every Sioux Falls
It's a
employee.
very small
It's a
number.
super
They were trained. I remember him talking
Yeah, there
about
was
that.
a training, a confrontation training.
They had a
and
training
all that
program
stuff.
just for those
So,
individuals.
how many citations do you give out with the public giving you the finger? I mean, sorry, you know what I mean, like not paying.
Very few currently, because
Okay.
we don't have that many. Most of the stuff is issued by the police department, so it goes into the courts if somebody doesn't want to pay, like a snowbird ticket.
Well, that's
If
nice
it's-
about that.
If it is not shoveling a sidewalk, when we go out and shovel it, we send them a bill.
Yeah.
Historically, what we've done, you don't pay it, we special assess it against your property. However, Minnehaha County is hesitating to file the special assessments and collect them for cities now. Just like unpaid utility bills, a lot of cities used to just, you don't want to pay it, we'll special assess it. We won't shut you off, but we're going to special assess you, we're going to charge you a 20% processing fee on top of that. So
Sure.
it's going to get collected with your property taxes. You know, you get a $1,000 utility bill and that gets whacked onto your taxes for a year, your mortgage payment increases dramatically. So the counties in South Dakota are pushing back against special assessing for some of these nuisance abatement and municipal infractions.
Okay.
So
So-
can we add them to the water bill?
Again, doesn't get paid, what do? We shut you off.
Well,
There
yeah,
has to be
then
that
it would be,
enforcement.
yeah,
There's gotta
then it
be
would be,
something.
Yeah, so,
So we've got to figure out, if we issue that, how many days do you get to pay it? And then, like our snowbird tickets, we issue you a ticket, it's $20. If you don't pay it in 72 hours, it escalates. If you don't pay it in another 72 hours, it escalates some more. Eventually, we end up in court if somebody still doesn't want to pay it. But
Okay.
How often do you, I mean, is that enforced with every infraction, or, I mean, is that happening?
Well, it needs to
on-
be. I think that's
Yeah.
one thing
we
really
issue
struggled
snow tickets. If we have a snow emergency, we go out and issue tickets. If those tickets aren't paid, we usually end up with you in court. Now, that usually it doesn't happen until summer.
But you have a process in place for what you do if somebody doesn't pay their bills.
Well, we used to.
You don't know?
Well, it all depends if the county's going to special assess those costs. If the county continues to refuse to do that,
Okay, but you have a process in place now, but that might change if
It is
the county
changing.
changes.
it is changing.
Okay,
So how do we collect those nuisance fees? I don't know yet.
So this is something that, like we say, I think we could at least start moving forward with some of the recommendations, but I think there's a lot of questions to be answered by legal on this. Is it reasonable to think that we can get some of those answers in the next 2 weeks? Is that, you know?
We can get some ideas.
yeah,
Okay.
because I guess the project manager blood in me is kind of looking at it from the reverse direction, which Trudy alluded to, where we know that we have I'm not going to call it a deadline, but if you start looking backwards and how much time it takes, there's some things that need to be decided now. You know, the ordinance on changing the stages to the 3-stage green, yellow, red, that's something that needs to be in process almost immediately so the city council can go through, make those changes, and follow through to get the March 2nd date. The same with the citations. You know, those are things that we need to be working now, not because we want to work on them now, but because they take the longest.
Sure.
And I think Kevin was exactly right on the education. That could come a month from now and we'd still have plenty of time to educate, but we don't need the month of legal and 2 readings of the ordinance and blah, blah, all that. So are we, as a committee, in a position that we could somehow recommend moving forward with the recommendations from the subcommittee? That's 2 recommendations, but could we as a committee say we agree with the recommendations that we should go to a green, yellow, red, and we should go to a citation-based system, not a misdemeanor? Could we say, yes, we all agree, and then let Brian and legal do what they need to do to make that legitimate? And if they have questions, they can obviously reach out to us, but the meat and potatoes of it to me is recommendation number 1 as written here, green, yellow, red, the little itty bitty fine print of it's going to be 5 days or 7 days a week. That's really not up to this committee to decide, in my opinion. I think that's more of a Raleigh wants Saturdays and Sundays off. It's more of a city level for them to say, okay, this is what the ordinance, we want as a committee an ordinance that says we're going green, yellow, red. Then the city can do their piece and say green, yellow, red is this, and it consists of these rules and these triggers. And we just let them do that. I mean, Raleigh's an expert. We need to let him do his thing. So does that make sense to everybody? To say,
Well,
let's
yeah, I
move
think,
forward with these?
I think, yeah, and so that's what I wrote down is let's put together an action plan on some of these items tonight. One thing I left out is media. Jamie, did you get a copy of the?
Yes.
Okay. Quick question with regards to
That's
that.
not what we have.
Sorry.
Jamie, I'll be emailing that. So first of all, with your permission, Kevin, can I email that out to some folks in the media
Oh, sure.
as including your PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would hope it also would get put out on the city's website too.
Okay,
but-
so I will email that out tonight before I leave, first of all. You had mentioned that you thought you were missing the second page of your tips Was that,
No, we just have the outdoor.
okay.
Yeah.
So that PowerPoint that was emailed to me, can I email that out and call that the final?
The last
You
one.
won't have the tips in that.
I won't,
I
But
think,
I
I
can-
think I do.
Yeah, the outdoor tips are.
because I just got
Oh, I'm
that an
sorry.
hour ago. I
Last
haven't.
one,
That's right,
last one
that's
that
right.
came in, that last email,
Okay,
it's got everything in it.
okay. So I will get all of that emailed out, just backing up a little bit. I'll get that emailed out to everyone in this group, number one, and then also to some of the folks at the media and maybe council as well.
Yes.
And again, with your permission, we're good with that?
Well, and again, Don, we're just asking you to carry forward, or with the committee's approval, those 3 recommendations.
Yep, yep.
And
So
how
that's,
the details get worked out.
yep.
We recognize it's going to take legal review and work within the city, but, beginning sort of at a 20,000 foot level,
Right.
if the committee thinks those are 3 things the city should move forward with, I think that was kind of the job we were hoping to accomplish.
So let's put a plan of action together here. All in favor of recommending these 3 items to council at next council meeting, say aye. Just
I
question.
think we want to clarify, we're recommending the concepts, not the details.
Correct.
Okay. Because even like on the
Because
citations
the details
and
really need
stuff.
to be worked out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the details are what needs to be worked out by the council and by the.
And
3
legal.
recommendations.
Yeah,
Right.
just the 3.
And city.
In the
Yep.
city,
And
yeah.
Brian,
Because
yeah.
like on the citations and stuff, the police chief may come back and say, we don't want to go with
We don't want, right.
unlimited $300 fines
Right.
throughout the summer. We want to come up with things. So as long as we're voting on the concepts, not the details.
Yes, good point. Thank you for clarifying. I agree. I think there's a little wrinkles to be, I don't want to call them wrinkles, but details to be ironed out.
By the
And some of that may
city
take a
and-
few
yeah.
weeks.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. by the
But
city.
the main objective of these 3 recommendations, all in favor of recommending that to council?
So, time out,
Yes, sir.
sorry,
Go ahead.
one more time.
Yep.
So this recommendation, I want it to be so that, Brian, you feel empowered to move forward with working out those details.
Yep.
So what would you like from us as a committee to make it so that you feel like you can go do the work that needs to be done on those details? If we just say the concepts of a 3-staged water restrictions, the concept of citations, and the conservation budget we're really not getting into, but if those 2 main things, how would you feel empowered? Is that good enough? Okay, perfect. I'm good, Don, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so all in favor of recommending the 3 recommendations. Number 1, create a staged lawn watering program. Number 2, create courtesy notices and administrative citations for lawn watering program enforcement. And number 3, create an annual water conservation budget. Again, details to be worked out. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we will move forward with that. I think we've got some details to start. And I just want to clarify, social media, so that's a given, email and text. So I will make sure, and I could use some help. I'm a little overwhelmed right now with work in this. I could use some help on this, making sure that we can communicate with the city on getting some of these programs put into place. So anybody that wants to volunteer to help, I welcome. And the signs, putting some, getting a sign program in place. Again, any ideas, email them to me, because I think this is something that is going to require a lot of back and forth communications with city, and I want to get going on it now. A program to get into the schools, I'm going to leave that up to the subcommittee at this point. You guys do if you want us involved, let us know. And then media, I will start spitting some of this out, some of these the presentations and agendas. I'll forward them on to Jill and her staff and some others.
So these are concepts, Jamie. These are not ordinances. These are not proposed. These are
They're recommendations.
Not the law yet.
recommendations. So I
You
don't
probably don't want to
people-
use the word ordinance yet.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't want
Right.
people to go, oh my gosh, they're changing it.
Right.
We don't
No,
know
I
yet,
understand.
but okay, perfect. Just want to.
And Don, I will help you with whatever, if you need help with whatever. just
Okay.
let me know.
Okay. All right. I'll be in touch tomorrow then.
Yeah, all
If-
right.
If you don't hear from me, call me tomorrow. We'll get going on it.
We should-
One thing,
Yes,
we will
sir.
get the water conservation tips on the website. If you want to send me that Facebook presentation, we'll get that on the website as well.
I will email that all out tonight.
Okay, just one suggestion on the indoor water conservation tips, and this is just our experience. You should probably add water softeners. One of the
Water
biggest.
softener rebates, you mean?
Nope,
No.
water softeners that malfunction. They are huge.
Just keep
The
Oh,
vast
okay.
majority of people that call us up and say, hey, my water bill is outrageous, what's going on, your water meter's not working, we say, check your water softener with cycling on its own. So instead of cycling once a week, it might be cycling once a day.
Okay, so that
Okay.
would be one of the indoor
Make
tips.
sure the water softeners are operating correctly, because that is probably one of the
Maintaining.
biggest.
Maintaining water softeners, that's a good word.
That's one
So it's
Amanda-
regenerating every day rather than every 4
Yes.
like it
Amanda, can
should.
you update?
Okay.
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 And just one thing that we did just briefly touch on in our 1 or 2 meetings prior to this, we thought about having a booth or something at that May 1st parade. If that, we haven't got any details worked out on that, and we don't know how well it would go over. How would we set up?
A booth or a float?
No, I don't think anyone of us wanted to be a float.
I think a float would be a great idea and hand out education items.
Well, that is,
I
I
think
guess
that would be
what,
phenomenal.
more what we were thinking is if we could get some kind of funding and have a drawing for something.
I mean, that's the other thing, is just the, the float idea, all the stuff that is wonderful. I mean,
Oh.
go to the schools, I mean, any of us could probably go to a school and do a presentation. I mean,
Mhm.
they're asking for adults to come in to the high school, to elementary, to speak. So, I mean, I think anything like that can happen. That's a little more volunteer, but you also have the materials and what you're gonna do, and I guess to me, that all gonna cost some money, so.
So that's my next item here that I'm getting into. But I mean,
Good transition.
good transition. Anything else?
Well, no, just that,
Okay.
if we could get to that May 1st parade, what could we do? What could we offer for a drawing? That
Okay.
would also, that would be a budget item.
Okay. All right.
It should be meaningful. I mean, you want people to sign up for it,
Sure.
Well, do we need to have a drawing, or could we have, when the mayor and the council come through the parade, could we have kids walking along just handing out brochures? Just handing out.
You're gonna need brochures.
Yeah,
You're gonna
just
put something
brochures
in
to
their
give
hand.
to the parents as the kids are collecting the candy off the street,
Sure.
the
And but
parents,
that
yeah,
also
and
is
just
going to
have,
be money. You'd have to spend the money to get
to get the
those
brochure,
brochures.
yeah,
Right.
but I mean, I don't know that we have to go to a full-fledged drawing per se, if we
Yeah,
just
okay,
get
that-
the
yeah.
information out there
Sure.
with,
One, I mean, I've done this a lot of times, so you got to have something a little bit of value of something that they're going to keep. I mean, whether it's a magnet that goes on
Like
the
a
fridge,
frisbee or
Yes, or-
yeah.
something
Yeah.
that's going to stick out there, so that, like, I mean, Mars puts out something, that has all the dates and what times, and anything that you could do out there that would go on the fridge, or something that would be on a ruler, something they put on their computer. You're going to have something that.
Something more meaningful than a piece of
Yeah.
paper.
Promotional advertising. So companies in Sioux Falls, and I'm sure, like you say, I'm sure you've
magnets
done
would
this
be
a
a
lot.
good
There's
idea. Yeah.
little squishy balls or
Yeah,
frisbees.
just, I mean, maybe you could get a raindrop costume, I don't know, something, kind of funky, and, have
I
them
call
throw it
that
out.
on that one.
Come on.
Did you say you volunteer?
No, that's not
Say
what I
that
did.
You gotta have the little stick-on
That's what I-
tattoo things for
Yeah,
the
like,
kids.
you could do, you could have tattoos,
That
you
would
could
be
do a
so
million
good for
things,
kids.
that.
Okay.
So, I mean,
I
I
saved
mean,
water
that could
too.
go on forever, I mean, a list of it.
Right,
You're gonna have to
right,
have
right,
some value. You
Right.
can't, I mean, you could have the booth, I like the idea of a tent, and, maybe you could have water, bottled water, I don't know, something.
So can I ask this, and we're going to get, again, the budget, I've got some questions for Brian we're going to ask here in a second. But I understand not knowing a budget yet, but can you and maybe one or two other individuals of the subcommittee come together and put some ideas together? It doesn't even have to be in a meeting, but just put some ideas together to get a general, what's the date of that parade?
May 1st or 3rd.
It's the first Saturday.
The first
Yeah.
Saturday, yeah.
Okay,
Sunday.
so can you come
Sunday.
together
First
with some
Sunday, okay.
ideas
So you want a budget of
First
something,
Sunday,
these are the
okay.
3 or 4 things we'd like to do, this is what it's gonna
Right.
cost.
6.
so that we can get that ball rolling sooner than later, because that obviously is right around the corner.
Must be May
Yes, yes, ma'am,
6th.
Barb.
So I would ask, when you're looking at this information, try to use businesses that are branded. So check with the chamber and see, we have a very fine printer here in Brandon that'll work with you, these promotional materials.
Mhm.
Let's try to use branded people if at all possible. I would just ask that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I know of several Brandon residents that work for promotional advertising companies, the companies that order 2,000 frisbees or 5,000 magnets. We
We
don't have an actual business in Brandon that does that, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think we do.
Do we?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
one of them north of town that does it.
Yeah.
I know.
Brandon has to do it, yeah.
Even to get the printed
Okay.
material.
So we'll look at, we'll look into that. If you have a recommendation for which business to use, please email.
Because I bet Kim would have a list, who's a chamber member,
Yeah.
that would have,
True, right, good,
Yeah.
right. Yep,
and I'm
okay.
almost positive there is a promotional person, company on the Brandon Chamber,
Okay,
or who is a member of the Brandon Chamber.
okay, all right. So if you get some of those ideas together for me, send them to me, and so that we can start getting some cost estimates. Next point, budget. Brian, how can we address coming up with a budget for the Conservation Subcommittee? Can we put together a general number tonight to get us, like Kevin said, a starting point that we can take to council next week? Or this is new to me, so I don't know. What are our limitations here? What can we do?
Anything you want, it's just money.
Well, I did talk to somebody with the city, and they thought they had like 2,000, something like that. Maybe that they could pull out of the committee.
I mean, we could take a look. I think what you start is, where you start is, if you want to do the rain sensors, let's get a cost and see how much they cost. We can estimate, it's pretty easy to go back through and look at building permits and say, X number of houses were built after 92 when low flow fixtures were supposed to be in place. And that's a pretty good majority of our houses.
Okay.
So we can, a toilet costs $75. We want to rebate half of that back. We can estimate how many houses predated 92.
Sure.
We can estimate if there's 3,300 accounts. If you want to give everybody a rain sensor over the next 3 years, we need to buy 1,100 rain sensors. We can take a look at the same thing with controllers, sprinkler controllers. If they cost $100, I don't know how much they cost, $100. If you want to rebate half of those for the new programmable ones, we can figure out we want to replace all of the rain sensors in town theoretically over the next 5 years.
Okay.
Those are easy numbers.
What about signs and promotional stuff? I mean, what about those
promotional stuff? I'm not thinking that's going to be a huge. If you want to hand out magnets or something, that you could probably pick up a few thousand of them for a few $100. It's not going to be a huge cost. Hand them out with pieces of bubble gum kits like that.
But does that have to be approved by council to spend that money on those items?
So. I think we can. The rebate programs, that's something that
right,
we're probably going to have to take some time.
Yep.
Promotional brochures and magnets or whatever, I don't see those as huge.
Okay.
Huge costs.
So you're saying we can put together an estimate or an idea of what we want, like a magnet with the colors on it or whatever you guys decide, and come to you and say we need 2,000 magnets that cost $200, and we can. Okay. So with that being said, that gives us kind of a first step here. And again, I think a first step would be on some of the advertising. Kim, would you take the lead on that, and you and work with someone else and maybe come up with some ideas?
We'll have to, probably meet next Tuesday, and we'll get everything kind of
You do
hashed
that?
out,
Okay.
and then from there we'll figure out.
If you'll do that, bring it to myself or someone in the city, and we'll get the ball rolling on that, because that's right around the corner of the parade. And I know you can have, because I've had it done. 2 weeks is, I think, about the minimum that usually those companies can get that stuff done. And that's pushing it, but I think we have enough time.
That's kind of what we needed. We just kind of needed to ask, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
And from there, we'll go meet next Tuesday. We'll
Okay.
hash out everything out, get it figured out.
Okay. My question to you and to Brian is, do we need to come up with a recommendation for council to say, hey, we want to set aside 30 grand a year for the Conservation Subcommittee? Or do we address those items as we get to them, which sounds like maybe what you were saying?
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the larger budget process. How much does the city want to invest? We're going to have to take a look at how much do we want to invest. We also have to take a look at the revenue side of it. If we're conserving, if we lose, we count that water revenue. So if we're losing 15% of usage, our revenue is going to drop 15%. So we've got to figure that stuff out.
Right.
But as far as budget stuff, like I said, that's easy. What do you want to do? How long do you want to get it done?
Okay.
If you want you want to replace every toilet in town in 5 years, we can figure those numbers out.
If we can come back with some, I think, pretty good estimates on cost of all these things, at least
Okay.
whatever the last bid was that the city of Sioux Falls had. But, you know, again, we were at 20,000 feet. If we're just hoping that the city would consider establishing a fund for a water conservation program, not just for the water conservation subcommittee, but, you know, to make the effort organizationally to do it. So if
Okay.
there's 5,000, 10,000, whatever, you know, I think we'll make the best use of that money as long as the mayor and council think it's a good idea.
Right.
That's just a great start.
Right. Okay.
And then just, that would be just a credit on the water bill? Is that typically how that would work, Brian, or is there?
A couple
I
of different
suppose
ways
there's-
you can do it. You do it as a credit on the water bill. You can do a check. All depends on what you want to do.
Do credit on the water bill.
I think
that
that'd
way
be-
you're less paperwork, less hassle, less mailing costs.
Okay. All right. With that being said, does that address any and all of your questions for us tonight?
Everything we had kind of discussed at the subcommittee.
Okay. All right. So we will get the ball rolling on that information and those items. We'll go from there. You guys meet next Tuesday, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So shortly after that, I'll if you'll reach out to me with what you've come up with, and if we need to meet off-site, you know, for 30 minutes to an hour to go over this, then or meet at the city, then we'll do so. With that being said, we'll move on. Any other questions from the subcommittee?
Great work, thank you guys.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great program. You guys
Well,
are doing a great
Patrick
job.
and Angie, who are not
Yeah.
able to be here tonight, did quite a bit of work. So
Okay.
I'll send him and Angie some kudos.
There you go.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we need to officially thank you all for the work that you have done so far and
Yeah.
what you will continue to be doing.
Because I think it's gonna be
Yeah,
a tedious task.
this was
But-
a great step.
But much appreciated and
Mhm.
much needed, which is, yeah. Anyway, I think you guys are doing a great job. Moving on. I have the schedule wrong here. I wanted to switch around items 3 and 4. I have on here future meeting schedule, like Tim alluded to earlier. I've had several people reach out to me about the frequency of how often we need to meet over the next few months until this RFP process is back. And I think we need to address item 4 on the agenda first, and then we'll come back to the meeting schedule. So moving on to item 4, just a general discussion. First of all, I don't have this on your sheet, but on my notes I have Paul Sano's resignation. Who was it? Pat, I think, emailed me, and Paul and I spoke of this last week. You emailed me? Okay. Paul and I spoke of this last week. With him resigning as the city engineer, he is part of this committee, and I think we at least should talk about it, whether he stays on this committee or not. Personally, I think he's a much needed, valuable asset to the committee, whether he's a resident or a current city engineer. He has that experience. So I do want to address it real quick. Any thoughts or ideas?
I have absolutely no issue with him staying on the committee,
Does he want to?
if he's interested.
Yeah.
His and I's conversation,
Indicate.
yes, yeah. So,
I'd love to have his energy.
sure.
okay. Short and sweet and simple, right? I assume that would be the case. Anybody opposed to that? Anybody have a problem with that? Okay. So I'll talk with Paul and we'll make that happen.
What does that mean for the RFP? Because he's like the point guy for questions and that sort of thing.
Nothing. Paul's on until the end of March 26th.
Oh,
So we'll be past this.
Okay.
Deadline, the submission date.
Yeah, the submission date. We'll have everything ready to go by the time he leaves. At least the review committee in place, the matrix, all of that stuff. So.
And that's why.
Answer the questions.
And that's why, and so this is a good question. I have this in under general discussion in my notes, the RFP process. The plan is to hire another city engineer, correct?
The council will review it, just like we do every position that has a vacancy in it. We'll review the position, decide if we want to move forward with a replacement or if we want to tweak it in some fashion. So that'll take a little bit of time.
Okay, all right. Any questions about the RFP process with Paul leaving? Any concerns, questions? Okay. So I had sent the email out about topics for tonight, and several addressed setting quality standards, whether we go with EPA standards or tweak it a little bit. And I understand the complications that are associated with that. That's not on, I don't have that on the schedule tonight, just because I was told several folks wouldn't be here, so I wanted to save that for a later date. But several people did respond back with ideas of like well 8, moving forward with well 8, or do we put that on hold? Mindy, I think you were one. What are your thoughts there? Just kind of think out loud here.
Well, just for those who weren't here last week, I just thought that we should either proceed with some other backup for a water source to well 6. In the event that well 6 would have a catastrophe and go down, currently that is our only water source that can supply the whole town long term on a regular, consistent basis. Yes, we have well 1 and well 3 that could get us by short term and limp us by if we needed, but if we needed 10 days or 20 days or a month worth of water supply, well 1 and 3 are not going to get us there. So my thought was just to have some sort of backup get going and put into place. And Mr. Hammond sat here, was that just last time?
Yes.
Okay. And said, for a town of our size, we need 4 to 5 different sources of water, whether that's MCWC, wells, whatever it is. For a town our size, we need 4 to 6 different sources. So when this RFP comes back, it's going to put out those sources of what we need. More than likely, it is going to say an additional well in the Big Sioux Aquifer, the Split Rock Aquifer, whatever the case may be, and in addition to hooking up to MCWC. So my thought was just, can't we get going on something so that we have a backup in case something should happen to well 6? I don't want to wait for the RFP to come back and the whole process to come back and we finally have a solution, which could take up to a year, and then it could take another 6 months to a year to get something online, when we could start with something now, knowing that we're going to need it, and then just add to it once the RFP comes into play.
Okay. So so here's the complication of this discussion and several others. Do we make that part of the do we consider that part of the RFP process, of which we will be getting that information, at a later date, or do we tackle that now? And that's what I want to hear from you guys.
Well, it is part of the RFP process.
Well, but I guess what I'm saying is, do we move forward? Do we, as a committee, try and move forward with that now, rather than waiting for the RFP process to provide that recommendation, or not? That's the question I have. That's why I have such a struggle coming up with specifically what item we tackle next.
Right.
What's the cost of well 8? Rough number.
I think that number came in. Bid was 200.
The driller was
About $800,000.
Yeah, not including the building.
Yeah.
200 for the well.
Yep.
Another 600 for the building with the meter and all that stuff.
So 800,000 is with the building and the well, everything.
Yeah.
That's VFD controlled, so we can do all of our controls.
And then to complicate matters, we're trying to move forward with well 7A, and like we were talking about a couple days ago, well 7, well 3, and well 1 combined could be a backup to well 6 if something happens to well 6. That could be a possibility. Again, that's a little bit of that is unknown, because we don't know. We don't have a 7A drilled yet. We don't have results from that. So that's where this gets a little convoluted, and it's this is a difficult. I'm struggling with this one.
Have you done a Camelog of well 8 yet?
You have one water quality tester.
Yep.
And the plan
We
is
were
to,
just
cons-
gonna, we had bid that project, I don't know if you guys remember that.
Mhm.
That put that on hold.
On hold,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everything was,
Right after,
Yeah.
yep.
the plan is to construct that just like 6, right? Construct 8
Like
just like
7,
6.
similar to 7. Yeah. But in the same location, it's near about 500 feet away from 6.
Right, to the same depth and screen, the same
Yes,
interval and
Yes, yes.
all of that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm not so sure
It's
of
slightly-
that. No, it's
we took
different.
Slightly larger, was it a
different.
larger diameter?
it's a larger
Yes.
diameter because.
Was that the difference?
Yeah, 6 was not.
The screen interval's a little different just because of the sand, or say.
You're slotting it differently?
Yeah, a little tighter slot.
Yeah.
And anticipated flow out of L8?
I'm sorry, what?
Anticipated flow out of L8
We
was
size it for 2,000.
To equal size 6.
Equal size, yeah.
Yeah, to equal the quality, the quantity.
What are you getting out of 6 right now?
1,400.
13, 14?
1,400.
And as Dick and some other folks said, that's pretty maxed from what I understand.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's,
Yeah.
you're really stressing it, I think.
So it'd be nice to have something else, whether it's
Yeah.
7A or 8, to take some of the
Exactly.
relief off of that. And
Yeah.
that I get and I understand, but I just,
So is
this is
there
a tough one for
any,
me.
any cost difference to aiming to have that well produce less? So let's say you wanted to try and do 8 and 7A and they both could produce 1,500 gallons and they could go back and forth between which one's pumping 1,500 or which one's pumping 500 or one's 1,000 and 1,000, or is there any cost delta to any of that, or is it all the same?
Your pipe size and screen size would be downsized a little bit if you didn't want to go up to 2,000 gallons.
And it would,
But
we're talking big money, little money,
No, we
like,
can-
instead of,
We can throttle the VFD too to control that.
right, yeah, I'm just
I actually-
wondering if there's any savings to be had there, if there's a 1,000 gallon a minute well is half of what a 2,000, I mean, that's none of that, right?
Because we still got to build our structure and we still
Sure.
got, the infrastructure's still there, it's just a matter of your pump size.
And that's
screen
piped all,
size.
that $8 million ish was pumped all the way to the, piped all the way to the
Yeah.
plant, right?
To the plant, yeah.
Brian, what are your thoughts on this? Not to put you on the spot, but I mean,
Well, we need additional water sources. That's been our goal for a while. You know, looking at the studies going back quite a ways, I'm uncomfortable with one main water source happening. Can we get through, if well 6 crashes and burns, can we level through for a while? Yeah, it's not gonna be pretty.
no, you're saying with well 7 or 7A in,
Nope.
or without?
Today-
Just one
today,
and
Right now?
today,
Okay.
1 and 3,
Okay.
3.
we would be in super red
Okay,
territory.
yep,
Yeah.
It'll be on the news again.
And it can be no watering, flush your toilets occasionally, drink all your stuff out of town,
right.
please.
Drink all the good
Go to
stuff.
the bathroom out of town at work.
Yeah,
Shower,
Yeah.
the water.
Could we muddle through? Yeah, but we recognize as staff that we are in a precarious position
Mhm.
with our water sources.
Agreed. I guess what I was getting,
Would I like to proceed with something? Yes, sooner the better. And then it gets back to, if you want to drill 7A and see, fully develop a 7A, and that might be cheaper than a full-blown well 8. And instead of,
That's a
going
very good
downsize
point.
8, we could do a well 8 instead of 2,000 gallons a minute. We downsize to 1,000, 1,500, and then move on to a well 7, which is going to be somewhat cheaper, 7A, which would be, I think, would be cheaper to develop because the well house is there. Assuming that we could use 7's well house, we may get 500 gallons a minute. Who knows? I mean, the best thing we could do at this point in time, in my opinion, is to test 7A and see what we can get.
Mhm.
Well,
So the shack would have to move, right, John?
Nope.
no,
We
No.
can-
Yeah,
you
we stay the
guys,
same.
you guys realize we could throttle well 7.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
realize-
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And
I'm
you
just-
can
I'm just
pump it
looking-
lower, the
I'm just
slower
looking
you
at-
pump it.
I'm just looking at worst case, 6 is
Right.
offline.
Mhm.
And
So what you're saying, John, is pump
It's-
it slow,
you can
use
pump
the
it slow.
HMO, and you can get
Yes.
the
And you can use
missing.
it. And we can, and then it was, that was the intent. You can use well 7 today if you wanted to. We can treat the water, meet EPA standards. Now, if you want to meet some other standards, that's different. But we can meet EPA standards. We can do a live pilot with well 7. That was the next step. Run through, start incrementally increasing the flow capacity through that based on how our treatment is working. And that has been the plan since the beginning. And we can throttle that well 7 down with the VFD considerably. Plus we got, valve control in there. So, I mean, that was the whole intention.
Can you, let's say that we do this 7, 8? Well, no.
We should
You're
call
saying
it-
7
we should call
solid.
Yeah,
Eagle or
You're saying
CJ or.
7, the
The
7
one
that's
that's
there
online.
now.
Mhm.
So that, let's say that you're pumping that low and you're meeting the EPA standards, because right now, what else do we have, right? And then what happens if 6 goes down? Can you throttle it up and meet EPA standards?
You use a combination of well
Well,
3
you're
and
blending,
well 7.
right?
To
With 3,
blend
which is
7
not
and
treated.
You're saying.
7 and 1.
Yeah, 1
Yeah.
is
7 and 1.
treated.
7 and 1. 3 is
Direct
direct.
treatment
To
system.
blend them
Right.
and treat it.
You
to
can't
bring it
blend, you can't blend it with 3.
No, but you
Yeah.
can blend it with 1.
So it'd just be 1 and 7.
1 and 7.
So 1 and 7, would that be enough if well 8 went down?
Well, 6.
Well,
Where
6
went down
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
to meet EPA standards.
So
The amount
that's,
of water we need.
Oh, to get the amount of water we need.
They're talking quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, quantity's there.
So we're mainly looking just for emergency purposes right this minute, is what you're trying to discuss, because I think that's a little.
Emergency, I think. Yeah, I think if well 6 goes down, that's why we want to get 8 up and running so that we could actually run. We don't right now. We don't have a lot of confidence in 6. Okay, because 6 has got some maintenance issues with it, and we just don't have a lot of confidence in that. And the public doesn't have a lot of confidence in 7.
Right, so is there something
So-
we can do with well 6 though to upgrade it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
scheduled
called
for
8.
repairs this week.
It's called 8, yeah.
It's 8. I mean, the actual riser pipe is corroded and rusting, and there's several issues with well 6.
And it's,
It doesn't have a control panel that's enclosed within a safe structure. I mean, there's a lot of issues with 6. 6 is we need to upgrade 6 anyway. I mean, 6 is a well, and it is not. It's not. The control panel is not in a safe environment. It's easy to break into that building. There's just a lot of issues with well 6. So the reason we're moving forward with that is so that could take the place of 6. We were going to leave 6 in place just for a backup. Yeah, redundancy. So, I mean, and
Right.
we can get to our capacity using the wells that we have, along with we were looking at other sources as well. So.
Yeah,
Well,
like
just-
that's
and-
what I almost didn't want to bring it up, I'm afraid to, Minnehaha County, and is that even
Yeah,
a
I mean,
possibility?
absolutely. But you got to remember, we can't even think about that until we change over our.
I understand that.
And that was my
Requirement.
next thing.
Right.
Is, I mean, I'm looking at this as, we do have to look at it as what is needed and what is an emergency situation and what we have to do. But I being the most cost effective, giving something that will be longevity for the community, and I've said that before. It's kind of what does the community want? Do they want to be self-sustained within their community, and then you want to sock more money into wells and our existing stuff because that's what we want. If we want to use other sources out there to provide water and things like that, then that's different too. So but I think you have to look at money wise. What's for longevity here? What is the smartest moves to make, and not spending money on something that we put money in because the community doesn't want to see that.
Rather than a 5-year plan, what's 20 years? What's going to be
do it
your best?
I mean, I hate to say it, you kind of like jump in with both feet and get it done and done. So
Right.
it's right for the next 10 to 20 years instead of, we'll kind of fix this.
Which I think is what the RFP is going to come back and tell us, and I think that was the purpose of the RFP was to look out those 20 to 40 years. I think what I was thinking and trying to address now is what we need right now. And if we can get well 7 because it's already there without having to go to well 8, then we wait until 7A if we can find, whatever. But if well 6 goes down, we don't have much to back it up.
So my question is the whole cost structure of the HMO process. What was that based on? Because we're talking about using well 7 as a backup if 6 goes down, meaning we can't blend that well 7 water with 6. So now we're left to,
So
if well 6 goes down.
So let's,
Because we're talking about well 7 being used, or well 8 being used as a backup to well 6, meaning we won't have well 6 water to blend. So if we take well 6 out of the equation, we have well 7 and well 1 and well 3, which we can't blend it with. So now we've only got well 1 to blend well 7 with. Is that correct? My question is, how much, if our gross alpha is truly a 50 in well 7, how much is it going to cost to treat that down to the standards? Because we don't have well 6 to blend it with. Because this whole discussion is a hypothetical based on if well 6 goes down. So we need to say that we're going to do 7A or do well 8 based on the fact that 6 may go down and we need to use those in place of that. So if that's the case, I think the question is, how can we treat well 7 when we don't have it well 6 to blend it with, only well 1? I know that we can treat it, but what is the cost, the process involved in that? That's my question.
so I want to talk capacity real quick, if that's okay. So I asked Raleigh, and so today we're using well 1 and 6. That's the main. Sorry, I should have wrote bigger, but those are the 2 main wells that we use. That's 1,600 gallons a minute, roughly, is where we're at today. What we're talking about is if we lose well 6, and OS is, you can figure it out, and that would be well 1 and well 3. And those two together are about 900 gallons a minute. So what that means is we're missing about 700 gallons a minute out of our flow to maintain.
Because of well 6 going down.
Because well 6 went down, we lost 700 gallons a minute total into our system, basically. Because we turned on well 3 to try and make up for 6, but it's smaller, so you lose 700 gallons a minute. Well, well 7, yeah, you could put it in, but there's 2 things that are important here. Number 1, what Don was talking about, you now only have about 200 gallons a minute of well 1 to blend with 7. And then the other thing is well 7 was really only planned to pump between 200 and 500 gallons a minute for the blending rates to get the concentrations down to where they are. So when you put that all together, if you start losing 6, really, we almost cut our capacity in half. And that's scary because you only have well 3 to back up, which works. It's a good, decent well, but it's not in the treatment plant, so you can't use it to blend. So realistically, to me, the way it looks, and sure we can treat well 7, but we can't blend it the way that John would love to blend it. So really, that isn't a great option at all. I mean, you're going to have to dump the coals to it on treating it, or I don't know. I mean, that's, John, you can talk more to that than I can, but so we're getting into this pickle. So would we be better off? There's a couple different approaches. Yes, we can use MCWC, but that comes with the concern of the chloramines, switching to chloramines. Not concerned, but we'd have to. You could do 7A and hope that is a better water quality. And if that is a better water quality, and you can dump in that 700 gallons a minute missing, if you will, and treat it less, great, it's into the system. Or there's well 8, and to me 7A and 8 are almost, which one's cheaper? They get you the same thing. Maybe I'm understanding that wrong, but if 7A can get similar quality as to 8, is one of them cheaper than the other, and is one of them quicker to implement than the other? Because 7A, to me, the pipe is already to the plant, and you're doing a lot smaller piece of pipe to connect it to the system. Could you get the similar quality from 7A as 8? And what do we need for capacity out of 7A? Would it be great to have 2,000? Yes. But really, we're only looking for 1,400 because that's what 6 is doing today. Would it be great to get that? Yes. But if we get a little less, because the screen's in a different location, different screen, all those things, I think you'd be okay. So we're going to spend money. What's the right spend? I personally, I don't think I would want to move forward with well 8 until we had the opportunity to do a gamma log, kind of like what we talked about in the last meeting. I think that makes sense. Let's not make the mistake Sioux Falls did on well 7 and put the screen in the exact wrong location. But is there an alternative to 7A or whatever you want to call it, Eagle, Blue Jay, pick a name? And is there a way that we could do that, and instead of 800,000, we can do it for 400 or $500,000? Is there something there? And that's where we're going to rely on, you, John. Is there an opportunity for us to do it a little cheaper by doing it at 7A? Does it save us some money? We're going to have to spend it anyways, but is there some potential savings there?
But correct me if I'm wrong, the last time you shared that 7A, the theoretic 7A is going to pump about the same amounts of liquid. I mean, that's the
Same type.
guess, is that it's going to pump about the same amount of water.
We don't know, actually.
No.
I think
Yeah, you
what
don't
I
know
said
that.
is
You can't
A
say
little
that.
less, right?
Could be a little less, I think is what he said.
So Dick,
From a quality standpoint, what I was referring to is what we noticed on the 2 pump tests. There was when they developed the well originally with LVG and Dick, the original pump test, when they pumped it hard, they got higher levels of radium and gross alpha. When we pumped it lower with the pilots, we ended up with.
So the radium actually went down
down.
when we pumped it less, but the gross alpha went up.
The gross alpha almost doubled. Right. And what Dick was saying, Amanda, was they don't necessarily think they'll probably get as much quantity, but based on the gamma logs done in the surrounding spots that he brought, and again, that was the whole reason I brought him. He's the he's the expert in this, okay? His recommendation was, or his thought was, that the quality would significantly improve, but that's not a guarantee.
I don't
And
think
again-
he said significantly. I think he said the quality may improve, or could improve, but I don't know that the word significantly was
It would
used.
be like well 6.
It should,
Yeah,
it should, because it's in the same stratigraphic.
Because it's in the, yes.
Right.
But you
But
don't know
that.
any of this
Right.
until you drill it and sample.
And that's where
We
the
don't even
question
know how much
comes,
water
do we
it
spend the
is, right?
$25,000 to find out? And that's what we agreed on. I think that's a good move. So the question is, do we move forward with 7A? Do
Didn't
we
we-
also need to move forward with
We've already
well 8?
approved that.
I was gonna say, we already recommended that.
So I know, that's what I'm saying.
7A, but-
We've said that. My question is, do we move forward with 7A, not this, I'm talking about the city, do we move forward with 7A and well 8? Because yes, 7A, we've already recommended that.
Yeah.
That's,
The
okay.
testing and stuff.
But we're bringing up well 8, and my point is, well, if we're moving ahead with 7A, do we also need well 8 right now? What are your thoughts?
And we haven't talked at all about the Big Sioux.
Right?
And, what you found in your
Possibilities.
2014 report,
Right.
which I think is great information that needs to get out to
Mhm.
this, I mean, it would be great if we could stick a couple Big Sioux wells in.
Yeah.
Okay, so-
I mean, that's another
We've already-
option.
Yeah, so I met with John on that, and I agree. I think that's a great option.
Yep.
But my question to you is, and this is, again, where I struggle, and I need your help. Do we move forward with that, or do we leave that up to the RFP?
Yeah.
That's where I'm struggling.
And what I'm saying is
Because I agree with you.
we, as a committee, have to be fully aware of all of these options. And it sounds like, we're leaving out the Big Sioux right now.
So on well 8, let's just circle back to that. I think that we need a backup. We need a good quality well. I'm not personally convinced if 8 or 7A, Blue Jay, Eagle, whatever we want to call them, I don't know which one makes the most sense yet, because we haven't done the research in 7A's location. We have done some preliminary research on 8's location. So the decision matrix there to me is, this is the quality that we would get out of both locations, this is the cost to get it to the standards, and this is the potential output, and then finally this is what it would cost. So if we're only going to get 1,200 gallons a minute out of 7A, and we're going to get 2,000 out of 8 projected, and it's almost the same dollars, it's foolish for us to say to do 7A. But if we can spend a little bit less on 7A and we can get a decent quality and it's less to treat it, then it makes sense. And I think we have to have all that information in place first, and that's, I think, why we as a committee agreed last week or last meeting to suggest going forward with that study in 7. But I guess one of the thoughts I have is there something we're going to learn from 7A that we haven't learned from 8 yet, and maybe we need to say to do that. So the Gamalog is an example. Should we while we have them hired to do 7A, is there anything we should say, hey, can you come over and do it in 8 the next day? Does that make sense?
It does to me, yeah.
What did we, so far we've done the test pump, so.
On 8.
Yeah, so just if we're saying to do something more on 7A, I would really like to see that same thing in 8.
I agree.
That way, John can take and Ryan can take and say, okay, apples to apples, here's the comparisons, and then here's the projected cost, and not bid it out or anything like that, but this is what we would think budgetary wise. 7A is going to cost you this, and you're saving money on pipe, but 8, you're getting more volume, blah, blah, blah. Let's just break it out. If we could go through that, maybe that makes sense. I don't, what are your thoughts,
So do we know
John?
when that 7A is going to be done, that test well?
City Council hasn't approved that yet, have they?
No, there's some other issues. It's not just sinking a hole in the ground, and we had some issues with discharging the pump water last time that we need to figure out.
The reason
we discharge it on the ground and run it down to the Split Rock Creek, which DNR said we couldn't last time.
Right.
We have to figure out where we're going to pump that to, and if we have to pump it up to the manhole on Aspen.
Oh my gosh.
Now all of a sudden we're well over the bid threshold.
Right.
It's either going to be piped or trucked, and that estimate is coming hopefully soon, but that will be added on top of Dick's estimate of doing well 7A. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just dump it down 7's hole.
Actually.
But the council hasn't given approval for.
No, that'll be
No,
next.
either one.
The next council meeting is when that motion is made.
Seriously, can you?
When?
Would be the 20th. So, yeah, 19th?
Can't even go.
Oh, 19th. Sorry, yeah. Yeah.
RFPs are due in 8 days?
The 14th.
14.
So that's where, again, that's where the reason I brought this up. Do we move forward with one and then compare the other, like you're saying? Or do we need to say, I want to move forward with 7A and well 8? I don't think we want to do both at the same time right now. I feel uncomfortable with that.
And then you have RFPs coming in 8 days.
Because we have the RFP process, and we have the Big Sioux to think
But
about.
the RFP is not going to give us dollar amounts, right?
That's part of the RFP is you need to identify water sources that
And
we
dollar
get
amounts.
and dollar amounts to get that
Cost
water
associated.
into our system. Add the MCLs.
I'm just saying I feel uncomfortable with saying, okay, we need, right now, before the RFP process is complete, I feel uncomfortable saying we need to go do well 7A, we need to go do well 8, and we need to go put a well in the Big Sioux. Because I feel like a lot, and again, I want your feedback on this, I feel like some of that is going to be covered in the RFP. And that's a process that we together came up with and said, that's what we want to do.
My big fear is spending the money, if you will, before you know, too early, and then all of a sudden we have solutions and we don't have money to spend.
Right, that's what I'm concerned
Yeah.
about.
You know,
Which the RFP will tell us.
you know, I think if we could go through, kind of like you were saying, John, and compare.
Well, again, okay, basically the committee is come full circle. What was recommended in the past was to drill additional wells in the Big Sioux Aquifer. We had went down that road of doing more work with the geologist and identifying where we should do that. We needed to continue looking for more. But my point was what was recommended by TKDA, what was recommended by Stockwell was to drill more wells in the shallow aquifer, continue exploring in the deep aquifer, and to look at a temporary connection or some type of connection with MCWC. And so I don't know what the committee, I don't know what these experts that you guys have heard come and say, if that's any different than what the city has been, I'll say, trying to do in the past 10 years. But I haven't heard it any different than what has been suggested to do.
Well, you only have so many options, first of all.
Right?
You know, hydrogeologically, you only have so many options.
Right.
Here.
You see what I'm getting at?
So,
You see what I'm getting at? This has kind of come full circle. And it's, I'm
Well,
glad it's brought an awareness to it,
Right.
because at least we're moving forward.
And I certainly did not intend, to make a decision and say, yes, we have to move forward with well 8 or well
No,
7A
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. I just think that we need to make sure that we are keeping that as a continued topic of discussion so that it doesn't get, all of a sudden we're, in August and now we're thinking, maybe we should be doing this.
right,
I
and
just
that's
think it
why I
needs to
wanted to
be-
start talking, let's bring in the Big Sioux
Yeah,
and
right,
get everybody
yes.
on the same
Yep,
page with
yep.
that too.
Absolutely. I just don't want it to get the whole process of the RFP that everybody thinks that we can just wait until after that RFP thing comes in a year when everything is done before we need to start
That's right.
thinking about,
Moving
well,
forward.
Like,
six.
we're in the,
I mean,
we're into
we're-
coming
we're
into this
into that-
full circle, but like, are we gonna come into this full circle and we're still gonna be sitting here and we're still doing the same thing in the longevity here? I mean,
Well,
if we're gonna be in this committee, we're doing this, with making decisions and getting things
moving forward.
accomplished, and we move forward fairly quickly once that decision is made, and not be,
Well, yeah, that's-
And the problem we have with the Big Sioux Aquifer, if I remember right, was finding places to drill.
We-
Right?
we actually have found
A place.
a place that's a
But-
good source, that's close to, I'll call it close to home, that's, it's,
But we have one. We talk about
We need-
having
we need
multiple.
Yeah, but-
We need
yeah, but-
multiple sources. of
you
You
just
could
saw,
st- you could still
you just
put-
saw what our shortage is, about 700.
Yeah.
What they've identified is about 600. So, I mean, to me, it is
Where is that spot?
at
Do you
Aspen.
remember?
Aspen.
Oh, at Aspen.
Yeah, you can still put
Oh, that's right.
probably
Yeah.
a couple wells at
That's
Aspen Park.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
Shallow
that's
wells.
where we were headed. So.
Mhm.
And that's, again, my question to you is as a committee, because before, a month or two ago, we said, we're going to submit this RFP process and
Mhm.
that's going to be all encompassing. So do we move forward with this? Do we try and make these recommendations to the council, or, I'm not saying one way or another, I truly,
You already made one, as I understand, I wasn't here last time, but you
Right.
already made one
Right.
recommendation to the council.
right,
For the
For 7A.
7A.
for 7A.
and where we at with that?
Well, like we said, that next council meeting, there'll be a motion made on that to move forward. So again,
So that's probably 6 weeks out before we get the results back from that. Because
Mm-hmm.
the 21st is the
And this-
council meeting, and then it'll take 2 weeks
20th.
probably to get it done.
How
19th
long
is
will
the
it take?
council
If we
meeting.
said, hey, let's go to the committee and say, let's do 8, how long are we out to have the backup thing done?
well, you're talking about a well in production?
Oh,
That's a
That's-
question for,
A year.
year,
yeah.
But we were in that, we were there.
yeah.
I mean, we would have been, by September, we'd have had 8 up and running.
It was on track to be online about September,
Mm-hmm.
before everything was put on hold.
and we're moving forward with shallow as well, so.
And that's because, and what are you
That's
thinking on
because,
well 6 as far as longevity? What are you thinking on that for how long it'll last?
Borrowed time?
Next 3 days, it's gonna get almost over the bill.
Yeah,
Well, careful on how you explain what is totally rebuilt,
yeah.
because we've got VFDs, we've got
Yeah, I'm
no
talking
controls,
well
no.
in itself, not
Yeah.
controls.
Yeah.
It's getting new check valves, getting new pitless monitor, it's getting new casing. And
And that's for well 8?
Six.
Well 6, oh, that's the repair.
That's the repairs.
That's just
And I'm comfortable with, I feel comfortable with what we've done, because yes, in a year from now, we could say, we could have had well 8 up and running, and a tornado come through and knock well 6 out, and we could say, yep, I'm glad we had it there. We could also say, after this RFP comes back, we could also say, they recommend we connect to, I'm going to make an example, MCWC, and it's going to cost us this amount versus this amount, you know, and your water quality is going to be this versus this. And it may be better, it may not, I don't know, but it would be a rough spot for us to have gotten ahead of ourselves with putting all these wells in when we could have been doing something else for supplemental sources at a cheaper cost.
But I go back to
And
what Mr. Hammond said about having one source. So even just connecting to MCWC is not going to be
no,
the
I'm
end all
talking
to
about
everything.
MCWC in addition to everything we have now.
Okay, because I mean that's when you're saying, the way it came across is the way I had heard it was, you know, we don't want to dig the wells because we may want to just connect to
No,
MCW.
I said a supplemental source, meaning in
So-
addition to everything that we
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
By no means does anybody think that we should connect to MCWC and that's it.
Right.
We use everything we have.
Yep.
This is all supplemental talk.
Yes.
Be clear on that.
Well, they should
And-
all
and
be
I said that.
supplemental to
They're all
work.
supplemental.
Yeah, they're all
They're all
supplemental to work.
They're all pieces of a puzzle.
together,
From what
Right.
I'm hearing, we need all these sources.
Mhm.
That's what I heard.
We
from-
do.
But the question is, when you use the word these, what does these mean? Do we need 7 and 8 and 6 and 1 and 3 and MCWC and a connection to Lewis and Clark, or a few of you know? That's the question that I don't know the answer to. That I think the RFP process can tell us, because we have multiple experts giving us their opinion, and I think that the overlap between those submissions will tell us, you know,
What
a true
the top
picture.
is going to be.
Yeah. That's how I see it.
So what do we decide?
That's a good question. So Mindy, I agree, this is a good topic to be discussing, because it,
Well, topic, I mean, it sounds like, you know, from what I'm hearing is 6 is not going to function. It could or could not go.
What's-
Well,
It'll
best,
function.
I mean, it's functioning, we'll get it repaired,
best case scenario will last another 3 to 5 years.
at least.
Worst
So-
case scenario, tornado comes to town, you have no source.
Yep.
But with the
So-
repairs that you're going to make, it's still going to pump. I mean, that's the point of repairing.
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all that that well is going to run dry, or?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Okay, it'll keep
If we
recharging.
were worried about that, we never would have done drills on lake.
Yeah.
Same area.
Generally in the same area.
Kind of my viewpoint on it is this: we got an RFP out that will identify sources and give us a roadmap into the future. If you wanted to jump that and bypass it and start sinking wells, whether it's 8, 7A, 2 or 3 in the Split Rock or in the Big Sioux, and make a connection to NCWC, we can start working on that stuff tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's so costly to do it all.
It is. It's going to be
Yeah,
very
it's
costly.
gonna-
Whatever
doesn't make
comes
sense
down
to
the
me.
road, whatever improvements are in the RFP are going to be very costly. We're talking new wells, new expansion of a treatment plant, et cetera. Just so it's not going to be a cheap solution. What I'm saying is, if you want to proceed with well 8, well 7A,
Big
and
Sioux.
one or two in the Big Sioux Aquifer, let's skip the RFP.
why do we have the RFP? That's my point.
That's my point.
Which I don't feel, again, I don't feel
Goodness.
comfortable with
To me,
that.
it doesn't make any difference. My job is to work with whatever the recommendation is and then whatever the council decides. What I'm saying is, if you want to jump ahead and do all that, why do we go through the RFP exercise?
I got the same question.
Well, and it kind of went back to what, who was the gentleman that sat in for a couple times?
Jay Gilbertson. He
Yes.
couldn't be here because of the weather, but
Yeah.
he is still
And
joining.
I can't remember what meeting it was, but when we took the vote on the RFP, he said that night that we weren't quite ready
And he also said that.
for the RFP.
He
I
said,
can't remember what night that was.
you've already proposed this? And I said, yes, this has already been proposed.
When he made the comment, if I remember right, when he made the comment to "we're not ready," he was talking about us having a short and long-term plan in place before we did the RFP, of which that is part of the RFP. We decided to incorporate that into the RFP, so that when we discussed that with him, he did correct himself. Not necessarily at the meeting, but he and I have had several phone conversations, and that is what his remark was in reference to. He said, you guys don't have a long-term plan in place. Don't get ahead of yourself with the RFP, for additional water sources until you know what you need. Well, part of the RFP process is to figure that out.
So again, it comes back to, do we want to go with 7A and 8 and then start looking in the Big Sioux, or do we
That's the
wait
question.
with 7A, get the RFP and see if 7A is going to be sufficient?
Well, we've already recommended for
Right,
7A
right.
to
It's
do the
already
test.
done deals.
Right, to do the test, right?
Right.
From
Just to
there,
do the test.
From there, do we, and like you said, Mindy, we don't have to make this decision tonight. It's good discussion, no. Do we move forward with recommending a well 8, or do we move forward with recommending Big Sioux Aquifer wells, or do we wait for the RFP to get that information? That is the big question. That's, again, what I am struggling with. I struggle with the fact that we sat here 2 months ago and said, you know what, I feel like this RFP process, knowing darn good and well what it entailed, I feel like this RFP process is a good thing, and I think that's what we need to do as a community, because it may save us money down the road. It may not. I struggle with stepping on our toes 2 months later, putting all that aside, because like Brian said, if we're going to decide to do this, quite honestly, I'm done. I don't even know why we're here.
Right, and that's,
Yeah, I do too.
So we knew many years ago that well 6 was a potential failure point for us. We knew that. That's one of the main reasons that Stockwell came in and did the water study in 2013, was because of that. There's a letter out there that says that. SEH came in and did a proposal too because of well 6 having a failure, that it was down for a day, I think it was, or something like that. And everybody said, oh, if well 6 goes down, we're in big trouble now. And we did that, and we did the water study in 2013. And if we want to go with what was done in the water study, the part that I'm really struggling with is we either had, and not attack on you, John, just let me finish here. We either had a piss poor plan or we had piss poor execution, or a combination of the two. And I warned everybody 8 o'clock I'd get the hangers. So that's what it comes down to, is we either didn't execute or we didn't have a great plan. And I think that we have experts involved. They're sitting in this room. They've been involved. They've recommended stuff, and I've heard John say we've recommended this multiple times. And honestly, John, you have, and I'm glad you have, because I keep hearing it's very similar, and my gut tells me that the RFP is going to say very similar things. And honestly, it's kind of crappy, because instead of just listening to Stockwell, we're going out, and I mean that's part of it.
But at least we'll know.
But I think we are correcting a process that needed to be corrected.
Right, but where I'm going with this is we all were committed to going through the RFP process, and for us to do research finding items, 7A, find the research. For us to do something similar to 7A in 8. absolutely okay with that. It's research finding. It's information that could potentially help expedite the solutions from the RFP. Because we're getting information that most likely the firms would want ahead of time. Is this information that you would want, John, to make an educated decision to help the city of Brandon? There's some of it that I think, yeah, you would. The 7A thing, sure, it's good information for you to have. And that's what I'm okay with in my position in the seat, doing that. And I'm not trying to run this group, please don't take it that way, but research finding is one thing. But actually going forward, I absolutely agree, Mindy, that we're in a position that we should never be in. The challenge I have is we've known that since 2011. And now at this point, what is the quickest solution? And that's letting the Water Conservation Committee do their thing, because there's a lot of potential there to save us a ton of water. Because those numbers I had on the board with well 3 and 1 being at that 900 gallons a minute, I bet that gets pretty close to our flows for the 600,000 gallons that we use in the winter. And I know that for a fact because Raleigh isn't sweating bullets that he's taken well 6 offline, because he knows he can survive on 1 and 3 while they do those repairs, right?
Probably going to be mostly 3. We won't be using 1.
So he can survive. Now, if the Conservation Committee does what we all hope they can, and they can get in the 1.2, 1.5, it's going to be tight and nobody's going to like it. But honestly, this is something that you guys would probably think is the last thing you would hear from Tim Wakefield, but we may have to rely on 7 as a supplement to get us through if 6 goes down. And is that feasible? I think that there's the potential there. There's a lot of hesitation in my voice, and you guys hear it and you understand. If we were to do that, one thing that I would really like to see is a pilot study by somebody that's not selling us components. And I think that's something that John can coordinate, is have another pilot study done to show that the HMO system is sufficient in treating at some value.
So just on that pilot, they provided the equipment and did some of the analysis, but that all the data went to a third-party lab. I actually ran the pilot myself. Good. I did all the testing in-house and sent all the logs.
Perfect. Very good. So, but Mindy, I'm right there with you on we need a backup. I don't know. I've talked a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I think part of that conversation is we're saying that we've made mistakes in the past, and we need to correct some of those mistakes. For me, a big chunk of this committee and what we've accomplished is we have made corrective actions with this RFP process. I know this RFP process takes time, and I know that it may put us in a pinch, but with well 7, we will be using, I don't think we might, but we will be using if 6 goes down. Okay, we will be using it along with conservation. I think we'll get through. But the RFP process has been a corrective action. I have spent many of hours talking to cities all around us, and nobody, and I repeat, nobody, and nothing against John. I've always said I like John. He's very responsive with phone calls, etc., information. It's nothing against John or Stockwell. I think, and again, nobody, a town of our size, utilizes just one engineering firm. They put these projects up for an RFP process. And there is a reason for that. And if, I don't know how else to add to that.
So what is your corrective process that you're referring to?
Incorporating this RFP into our decision making with major projects.
So you're going to go through, and I'm game for RFP. I'm all for it, especially when it's fair play, but when you've got a recommendation that's been made at this point by an engineering firm and had a study presented to the city, and now we've got competing firms taking that information and going to put it together into a recommendation that has been by geologists that have come in here and basically have told this group to nearly the T what was recommended by Stockwell, that now you're going to have these other competing firms come in and say something different. So if you're going to listen to that something different, I really question that. And then if you don't listen and you go forward with what was with a different competing firm, but it was the same aquifers, the Big Sioux, Split Rock, and MCWC, what did you gain?
We gained a process, and I agree. The first time utilizing this process is ugly, because there is information out there that you've put together, your company has put together, that other folks are going to feed off of. I understand that. I get that. And
but
so
that's,
I don't have a problem with that.
But that's something the city paid for,
Right, the city paid for
I don't have a
that.
problem with that.
Plus you have 50, 60 years of data that the state has already collected also. I mean, there's a ton. And, Stockwell probably, hopefully, utilized a lot of
Some of that.
data that was done before then.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
So
Yeah.
I agree. The first time around, or maybe even the first couple times around, I think yes, it's probably an ugly process because of some of those things you mentioned. But I do, in my heart, believe that it's the right one, and that comes from, again, every town I talk to, and I have spent many hours on the phone with city engineers, city administrators, and other engineering firms in South Dakota and other states, and utilizing the RFP process is the right thing to do. Now, would you question it, or is it unfair, or is it a struggle this first time? Yeah, it might be, but if we never make that transition, it'll never happen. We never will. 20 years from now, we'll still be doing the same thing.
One more. I mean, if nothing else, at least the RFP process will get have the town moving forward with a plan, because that is one
A long-term plan, is that what you're saying?
A plan, because the plan has not been executed, and that has been something that has been cleared that it needs to happen. And so I think this has been good. The conservation program is outstanding. A plan moving forward is
So would you say this today, if a plan was presented to this committee and city council, would you say that those people or would you say that city council is more educated on that plan than they were 5 years ago?
Yes.
Or even 1 year ago? I agree.
I do.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Period. It's just that simple to me. I think.
And it's not like we have a ton of options.
No, we don't have a ton of options.
So
Right.
whatever these RFPs, they're going to be essentially probably the same thing.
Very
because
similar, yes.
We only have one more choice than Sioux Falls does. Sioux Falls
Right.
has one choice.
Right.
They had one choice for years and years. They had the Big Sioux Aquifer, period, the river. We have the Split Rock Creek in addition to the Big Sioux. But I mean, we don't have that many options to begin with.
Agreed.
So things are going to be the same.
It's going to be very simple.
The public will put up with a lot for a long time until it reaches a point where they won't take anymore. You're seeing that in Florida right now. That's what we saw last October. From whatever happened, all of a sudden we're going along and then bam, there's a water restriction. That just caused, that was it. People were like, what is that for? And that's why we're here. We are here in response to that. And so we are trying to do what we can. And yeah, there were things that were not done right, missed opportunities in the past. And the public is going, what is going on? And so one of the reasons we are here, I think, is to try to fix that and go, okay, all that happened in the past, we're starting now. And we are looking down the road.
Agreed.
For sustainability, to make, to make Brandon have a sound, secure future as far as water goes. So
Agreed.
that's why we're here. And if you get RFPs that are exactly the same, yay.
So be it. But I think
Yay,
it's,
and they
I think
will
it's
be the
part
same.
of, and
And
we
they will be
probably
the same
will.
because you don't have that many options.
But I think it's part of a proper process.
It is, and I think
I
we have
can't
to.
stress that enough.
And we are educating the population, we are educating ourselves, we are looking at all different aspects of this. And I think when you have the community that steps up and wants to be part of the process, I think that's even better.
Exactly.
So
I agree with that.
you can't help but make Brandon stronger because of the people and the work that they do.
You have to involve them, and we've definitely done that
Oh,
in
yeah.
the past few months, and will continue to a greater extent. Okay, so moving on that happy note, I think we can move on.
Are you good with that, Mindy?
I was fine.
Okay, I just,
Well, like you say, Mindy, I don't think the subject's over. I think there's
No, it was not
Yeah.
a decision-making subject. It
Right.
was just
Right.
something that needs to be,
it's a debatable
it
topic.
needs to be something that is
Right.
continually discussed and brought
Right.
forward.
Right.
So I was hoping we could talk about the 2014 report in the Big Sur.
Yes.
Are we doing that next time so that we continue
So,
to talk about
so I have
those
that next.
options
So
and
I
things?
called Ryan today and asked Ryan that the update is not complete, and I have that.
Oh, I don't care about an update. Just talk about the 2014. You have pictures and things over there.
A couple printouts over there.
Yeah, just talk about that. Educate us on what you found and where we're at in the Big Sioux. So we all have a pretty good idea what the Split Rock Creek is all about, right?
Right.
So let's have that same information for the Big Sioux.
For the Big Sioux Aqua. Okay.
What information are you talking about? The one
Just
that
like
we
what
did,
it
the
was.
study that we did with
Yeah, the
LBG?
2014 report, yeah.
That identified shallow aquifer sources.
Right, I know that, but and I read
What are you
your
looking at?
report.
I'm not sure what you were.
Yeah, I'm a little confused too. I thought you were referring to the
Okay.
update that Stockwell
Oh,
was going
no,
to
no,
provide.
I think
yeah.
we're getting to the hang grease point,
Yeah,
so.
I'm
Yeah.
confused as to what.
You're talking about the six
The report that
exploratory
was
wells.
sent out, the report, the
Yeah.
2014
Yeah,
report.
and I got, okay.
Yeah, it's just, tell us what that said, because we have not really talked about the Big Sioux. We've focused a lot on Split Rock Creek.
Oh.
Okay.
And
Those
so,
were that there was the report that LBG did for Stockwell, where we did some drilling in Aspen Park.
right,
And that is the different wells through Aspen Park, and we've got, I didn't bring that with me, but, for example, it's to the, way to the right-hand side is the one that Jay and some of the people, when they looked at that one, thought that I could get maybe 500 gallons a minute out of that one. And that's the one that LBG is, and we're moving forward with a proposal to the city to do that well as well 8. And this is the shallow aquifer. This is why we had in well number 1 and well 3, where we have limitations to those shallow wells, because you see the gray area there is clay veins within that
Right.
shallow aquifer.
right,
So the
right.
brown is good?
Yeah, that's the sand and gravel.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, the farther we went to the north, the better off that was.
Right, and that is my whole point. I mean, I get your report.
Yeah.
I've read everything.
Yeah.
I understand it. It's good stuff, and the Big Sioux should be considered as a source, and we all should discuss it the same way we discussed the Split Rock Creek,
Just Split Rock Creek. Okay.
because that's going to come in the RFP. They're
Yeah.
gonna
So
want-
that's a good point.
So I wanted everybody to be on the same page when we talk about the Big Sioux. That's the only reason I wanted to have you go over, because you've had those for several meetings, and I thought we should really hear about that.
Okay. So I agree. When this RFP comes back, first of all, there's going to be a selection committee to decide on which engineering firm is awarded the project. We haven't really talked about that, but it sounds like that may be made up of a couple council members, a couple of members from this committee, maybe some city staff. And don't quote me on this. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We just had some preliminary discussions. That's kind of a side note, but it's good to know. But when that comes back, you have a good point. We need to be educated on the Big Sioux Aquifer. I agree. So what can we do at our next meeting? Because you're the hydrologist. I'm going to ask you, what can we do to better understand that aquifer as a source? What can we do as homework to prepare for that discussion?
What can this committee do as homework? Well, you could read the 2014 report. But you all might not.
My dog ate it.
But without having a degree in geology, you might not understand all of that. It's not quite as complicated as the Split Rock Creek. But I mean, you could look it over. You could look at the water.
I mean, Jay will be here. Do we utilize Jay? Do we bring Dick Hammond back in? Yourself? I mean,
I think if, Ryan, if you just go over some of those figures and diagrams from there, some water quality from that south well where you're starting to see some VOCs, that would be interesting. Talk about saturated thickness and what might be options in the Aspen Park area. Okay, so for next time, we do have a meeting scheduled for the 21st of March is our next meeting scheduled. From there, I do want to talk about our frequency, whether we continue every 2 weeks or once a month. But for now, that meeting has been scheduled. We'll stick with it, the 21st of March, which is a Wednesday. That may change. There may be a conflict of a schedule, and if that happens, well, you all know as soon as I do. But for now, let's do our homework, read the 2014 study, so that we can bone up on information regarding the Big Sioux Aquifer, so that when that information, again, we're trying to better educate ourselves, and that if we're going to be part of this RFP process, or at least two of us are, this is good stuff to know. So thank you for raising that point, and we will incorporate it into the next meeting. Okay. From there, that about wraps it up. We're at our typical usual time. Every time I say I think it's going to be a short meeting, is it?
Maybe next time you shouldn't say that.
Okay.
It's no reverse psychology.
Okay, assignment of update to be written and reviewed.
I'll write it.
Okay. Two reviewers.
I'll go ahead and review this time.
Tim and Kevin reviewing. Got that, Amanda?
Yep.
So you'll send it to Tim and Kevin? All right, and with that, I will put together a report of what we discussed at tonight's meeting to talk about, if nothing else, as an open discussion with council at our next council. Any other questions, concerns? Adjourn.
I think this will give people so they can see where it is.
Kidding. Just kidding.
So we gotta win this, otherwise